Thank you for listening to Positive Filter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends.
Welcome to Positive Filter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Filter. I'm joined by a special guest. Well, everyone's a special guest. I'm joined by my friend, Brian Palomo. You know what I'm saying? And I did that correctly. Not really. I probably still murdered his name. But this is my good bro. He actually used to work with me, but he moved out to, I guess, is it technically the West Coast? It's the West Side. Not really on the coast.
Western
out there. But he's been following the podcast. We vibed on a positive tip when we did work together. And I just let's get him on the show. Let's get cracking. But before we get in this episode, Brian, why don't you give the listeners a little introduction of who you are?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Appreciate you having me on here, Phil. Wu-Tang Clan for life. Yeah. Yeah, no, me and Phil both got Wu in our top 5. So we're always out here making moves with that. It's one of the things we really connected on, actually. But yeah, so little background, just to keep it quick. So I grew up in a military family. My father was in the Army for I think it ended up being 21 years. It was a little bit over 20 years. So we bounced around a lot. He's originally from the Chicago area. So that's where a lot of my family is in the US. And then my mom is born in Germany. So I got, a bunch of family over there as well. So long story short, moved around, ended up in Virginia, finished high school in Virginia, went to George Mason University. That's where I did my bachelor's and my master's in sociology and in higher ed. And then that's also when I started working with, shout out to Lewis, worked on the well-being out there, the well-being initiative. And I had a graduate assistantship. And it's also when I met Positive Phil. It was a good time. And I was working a lot on helping with programming and teaching folks about well-being and spreading that throughout the campus, right? And just helping to create the best environment for all. It was really cool. I was excited that was a thing and to be able to meet a lot of different folks who were involved with that. Because, just working with well-being, you meet a lot of really positive folks who are doing a really cool, working on really cool changes in the world, right? And care about, are you good? It's one thing to have you come to the school and just, be, just be a student there. It's another thing when they're actually worried about you as a human being, right? Beyond being a student, are you okay? Physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, all of those things, right? So it was great to be experienced that. I got a lot of professional development with that, built some connections. And then I graduated with my master's and I started job searching. I like that better. Hunting's a little violent, but
I was like job hunting. It's funny. I never thought about that. I was about to random interject. It's because we don't, now we don't say job hunters. We say active job seekers.
Yeah,
It's pretty cool. I didn't think about that too. I'm hunting. Okay.
Yeah, it's a little violent, but but also hunting can be cool if you're doing it for something you need. It's my livelihood. So, but anyway, so I was searching for a job, and another big shout out, TJ Brown used to work at Mason as well, and Odime. He moved out here and got a job out here working in the office I work for now, and I've known TJ for years since I was a freshman in college. And he actually hit me up and said, hey, there's a job here. You should apply for it, et cetera. So I ended up applying for that job here, as well as I got another job offer in New York. But mostly cost of living and plus having TJ kind of got me to come out here. And so now I work for the University of Arizona. I work in what's called the Thrive Center. And I work as a strengths coach. So my job is centered on, I work with students on academic probation, but particularly beyond that, which also shout out to work with Lewis, right? I focused a lot on the Clifton strengths and helping students really have a strengths-based approach to their work. So I got to go do the Gallup Clifton strengths. So I'm officially certified to them too, which is really dope. And then, so I do that. And then I'm also in a PhD program now. So I'm studying higher education over here as well. So we're just making moves everywhere, man.
I wish I need to get a sound machine music ba 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 like that. That's pretty dope, man, because honestly, I learned, actually, I did not know that you were a military brat. Shout out to that, because I'm a military brat, 30 years. Hey. My dad, 30 years Army colonel. And that's as similar to your path. That's how I ended up in Northern Virginia. So It's very mirrored. But you know what? I'm gonna just jump right into another thing that we are mirrored in, and that is being fellow aces of Greek letter
Hey,
organizations. Shout out to the aces out there. So
yeah,
go ahead.
ones get it done.
So everyone knows. I'm probably gonna say it like alpha, alpha, alpha all the time. But Brian, go ahead and tell them what organization you're a part of.
Yes, sir. So I'm a proud brother of Lambda Theta Phi Laboratory Incorporated. So we are the first Latin fraternity. We were founded at King College. Well, currently it's now King University, but at the time it was college still. On December 1st, 1975. Yeah, man, basically the big thing that kind of came out of that, right, is so you saw in the 70s, you really started to see a big surge of Latinos, Latinx, Hispanic, whatever umbrella term you really want to use, starting to attend higher ed institutions, and kind of similar to how a lot of some of these other movements came into play. That's really what that came out of. So my founders were there. It was a lot of Cubans and Puerto Ricans. And they basically just felt there was kind of a gap, right, when we're thinking about representation and access on campus. So fun fact, right? We go back to before we were even an organization, a fraternity. My founders were on campus, and there was a an election on campus, right? And the ballots were in English, but you started to see a real rise in Spanish-speaking students who were coming to the campus. So what my founders did to try to be one of the things that they started to do to help facilitate that, that bridge to help with that access is they actually helped to translate those ballots, right? And they were there and were a part of help. So people could have their voice heard, right? So yeah, that's just a small little snippet of kind of why we were founded. We've grown a lot, right? We're now coast to coast. We got, obviously chapters here, right? Which I'm actually the sector vice president on here for Arizona, New Mexico, Sector 1. All right, so I'm in charge of the chapters here in Arizona as well as New Mexico, but we got chapters in California, Texas, Florida, Illinois, even up in Idaho. We're just making moves everywhere. So yeah, man, super proud. Love the organization. Love the connections I've built. We got shout out to LTAs, Lambda Theta Alpha, super close sorority to us. Everywhere I go, they're super welcoming too. We were both founded in the same institution, same time, which is awesome.
So we see a lot of allusions, or illusions. I don't know, some comparisons from the Latinx groups to historically MPH groups. What was when the founders organized these organizations and developed Greek letter organizations? What was the draw to making things such as lines, and from your understanding, and how does that bridge our two kind of organizations together?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways to think about it, right? And I think our founders had some conversations about that, right? And it kind of bounced around in all these different, when you're basically starting a movement and starting a fraternity, right? Originality is a really big thing that comes into play with that. And I think that was a big part of the conversation, right? For example, one big thing when we're looking at divine on organizations, stepping and strolling, right? And that's a thing that's not only really big in MPHC culture, right, but even going bigger when we're looking at what that's rooted in, right, and thinking about the historical aspects of that, right, and how that's really embedded in a lot of cultural pieces of the Black experience in the U.S., right. And I think that's, among other reasons, is some of the conversations that came up, because there were some of the founders that were thinking about that, right, and brought up and said hey, maybe we should stroll. That seems like a thing that's cool, and folks are doing it, etc. Right. And then conversations were had, and I'm given not necessarily the best synopsis, but basically they talked it through, and we were actually helped to be founded by a military fraternity that also existed, right, and it was on campus, and that was part of what helped to create a lot of what we do, right, because we're really focused on a lot of pieces about discipline, right, and and that also led into us creating saluting, right, which is an homage to that, but also, right, that a big thing in a lot of Latin American countries is when you come of age, right, whatever that age may be. We think of it at 18 here, right, but when you reach that age, for a lot of countries, it's a requirement for you to be a part of the military in that country, right? And it's almost, and it's like partially an homage to that, right? And thinking through as a part of our culture, how that's a big part of the culture for a lot of us, on top of just being able to pay respect to those who came before us, right? And really express ourselves. And it's changed a lot, right? Like you've seen some of the videos, you know, and originally there were no movements, right? It wasn't as creative. It was more just focused on like greetings, you know, of somebody that kind of came into the space, and then it's really grown drastically, right, into ways that we can really express ourselves, which I know is some things that have also happened, you know, within your council as well, and how things have definitely shifted and how a lot of those things are happening as well. But I think that's just really interesting and cool to see, you know. And I love to see right now too, because Salutin is going through a big man, I don't even know what to call it, like almost like a revolution, right? Like it was just like it's like a new wave almost right now, right? I'm thinking almost similar to kind of like hip hop, right? And where you know, somebody comes out with a new sound, right, or a new whatever, right, and somebody's leading the charge now, right? Shout out to Red, he's a brother from Connecticut who's really leading the charge on Salutin. You know, that man loves Salutin. You know, I do too. And you know, he's been really big on pushing on creativity, right? Ways we can really put ourselves up above others, right? And really being able to have that awesome image, right? Almost like like our brand, right? Saluting is our brand. That's what's outward to the public, and we can recruit a lot of people that way too. You know, people love it. That's one of the things that got me. So
so let's bring that back. So like you are coming to college. Were you first generation, or your parents gone to college, military, and just take us back to that freshman year, and then just experience, like, were you actively looking for a sense of, I'm not saying belonging because I know we don't join it for that, but just looking for community? Take us to your freshman year. What was that like?
Yeah. So I crossed my sophomore year. But so I was a first generation college student, but my father actually had been working on a degree for a while. We graduated like not too far apart actually. Which was actually really cool of an experience. I know that's like a little off topic, but it was just cool to be able to like experience that. But yeah, man, I came to school as a first gen student. I felt really confident. I was ready to make moves. Like I was a little too confident. And also like thinking back for like the tail end of my high school career, like etc. Like I didn't really have as much connection to my culture as I would have wanted, or even knew that I wanted, I guess is even another way to put it. So when I first came to Mason, I wasn't necessarily looking for that initially, right? Like I met HSA and Aguilas, which Aguilas is a mentoring program for first and second year Latino students on campus.
I think I heard of something. I think I heard that before. That's why it's like I did the light bulb. But yeah.
Nah, you good. Yeah, if you've seen some kids walking around campus with like eagle on their shirt and stuff. Yeah. So, but even before that, right? Before I got connected to all of that, I play ultimate frisbee, right? Which is, to be straight up, is a very white.
I was like, straight up. But
so like, you know, but I love the sport. The people are cool. Like I felt really like, you know, but it wasn't quite enough. Because it didn't feel like I could fully be myself there, just from, you know, being brown in a very white space. But I started off with that. I started going to some like white frat events and stuff because I didn't know better at the time, right? Like I didn't know that there were organizations outside of that, because I grew up, you know, I saw like, yeah, I mean, yes, I watched Spike Lee joints and stuff like that, but like also like I watched Animal House and stuff like that. So like, and, you know, old school like movies like that, you know. So I was like, cool, like this is college, let me experience it. And plus, I knew I was at a PWI, not an HBCU, so like I didn't like I don't know, just in my head that's created the storm of like, okay, so like that's like it's a PWI, so like white frats is like the norm. So I went and like checked out some of those parties, which I'm not gonna say I didn't have fun. But like it just ended up not really being fully for me. I started meeting with one of them and like doing some stuff and meeting, and there were some guys who were thinking about pledging, and I was talking to them, etc. But amidst that process, I was a Mason ambassador. So I was doing the tours and stuff on campus, and we had the like why can't I remember the name? But basically the event where like all the admitted students come in, admitted students stay.
Oh yeah, I know what you're
And
talking about. Yeah.
I was working, and there were the tables in front of sub one.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, at that point, right, when you get there, as me working, like I got nothing to do there. Like they're just gonna go around the tables and do what they gotta do. So I was just walking around. I figured I'd take a look myself.
Oh
And
snap!
then
Yeah.
and then I was walking, and then like all of a sudden I hear like, yo, or something like that, right? And I look over, and it's, he's not my big yet, but it's my future big, right? Who's at the table along with my my pledge master. Y'all call them deans, pledging, right? Whatever you want to call it, DP,
Yeah.
PM, whatever. But he was at the table as well. And then one other brother from my chapter, Dan, right? And they were just on the table, and they're just like, "What you doing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just working, like walking around, whatever. Like, got nothing going on." So I started a conversation with them. They were mad cool people, right? It was cool to meet some Latinos as well.
Right.
So I got their number. We ended up connecting. I was interested in them for a while, and it was definitely nice. Like I wasn't. So I think what I'm basically getting at is that I wasn't looking necessarily for that.
That's usually what happens. That usually happens. I had that same story. I mean, well, my mom's an AKA and my dad's a Q, and so that's the only ones I really knew of, and Kappas, because my grandfather was one. So it's kind of those understandings. But I was made familiar with the alphas in undergrad, specifically the same thing. I went to one of those, like when I transferred to JMU. Well, I first went to HBCU. I went to HBCU and I saw all the different ones, but I didn't really know what they were. And then I went to JMU and transferred, and I went to the same thing as you. As I went to like a student org fair, and I saw the alpha booth. But I didn't become an alpha in undergrad. But that's a long story short. But it was like that same mindset is like, I think that's why it's always great that they have that. I think that should be a tradition. You don't know how many people need to go and literally meet people at a table. I don't know. And long story short, that's the kind of same thing.
Yeah,
And
I was just gonna
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it was just interesting how like I feel like almost subconsciously I was looking for it. Like I didn't even know. I don't even know. Like I didn't know I needed it, basically, right? And there were different factors that led me to really start to notice that, right? Like my RA, when I was a freshman, was connected to ODIME, right?
Okay.
And then so I met Jalen, and then Jalen helped me get to connect to ODIME, and then ODIME is through how I ended up meeting some other folks and getting through Aguilas, which was helping me to meet more brown people, for easiest way way to put it. But then the fraternity ended up being like the next step, because I really, it was the next step from having like a community, right, to having a family. It was like a whole nother level of that.
So I love it. So you said you're actively saying you're feeling more connected. Obviously you said you studied sociology. Take us after you finished, right? You crossed. Did it kind of just like reaffirm like what you wanted to study? Like, did you like start diving deeper into your the sociology subject, or did it or you said I was actively seeking to be more reconnected with my culture? Like, tell us some ways that it felt like, like maybe not even in your classroom studies, but just in general with your individual development as a Latinx person, that this process helped.
Yeah, no, it's a funny story, actually. I wasn't a sociology major yet when I went online. I went online as I think I was still a poli-sci major at the time, I think. Excuse me. And I actually, at the time, I wanted to go to law school, and I wanted to go to the military. I grew up always wanting to go into the military. I wanted to go into the Army. It was a big thing that also had a connection with my big as well, who is in the Army. And, with my father being in the Army, it was always it just felt right. I always had that mentality that was kind of the space that I was meant to be in. And big reason that I maybe didn't, there were a lot of different reasons, right? But one of them was I remember having a conversation with my mom about it, and it wasn't really, just not even necessarily directly about me being in it, but kind of talking through a little bit deeper on some of her experiences with my father being in it and just being deployed a lot and how like that affected her and things of that nature. And that amongst like just me discovering other different subjects, including sociology, because I took that a couple classes in sociology, right? All that stuff created that storm where I was like, okay, like maybe maybe I'm not meant to be in this specific space, because that had already shifted, right? Because I came to college as a computer science major, and then I came into like history and government, and then I became a sociology major, and then that was kind of like where I ended up having my home. But I think that did help though with me thinking about it, right? Because a big part of what I enjoy thinking about within sociology and social structures and things of that nature, and even in higher ed that I'm in now, is what you were kind of alluding to earlier, is thinking about sense of belonging, right? But not, and even further than that, thinking about access and retention, right? Access is not necessarily something that, I mean, fraternities can help with it. We've done some things where we're working with high school students, et cetera, but that's really more like, an extra thing. More so, fraternities can really help with that retention, right? Once students come in, giving them a community, right? Having folks that have been going to school can help them with that stuff. And then also even having people who can help them get a job, right? Because that's real, right? Like you graduate, like we got lives to live, we got to make money, at the end of the day in the world we live in. So I think all those pieces really actually helped big into that as well. As for the culture, it's kind of ironic actually, because my father's side is all Mexican American.
Okay.
And there's not that many Mexicans in like DC area, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? I think it actually helped me a lot. But when I crossed, right, there weren't really any Mexicans in the chapter. I think there still aren't, actually. I think I'm the only one. And
interesting.
What's interesting, because when you look at the DMV area, right, you get a lot of folks from El Salvador.
Yeah, I was about to say,
and other parts of Central America, Caribbean as well, like Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, etc. So I really got a good chance to connect to cultures, but it wasn't necessarily my own. But like that's also like, that's cool. Like they're my family, right? You're my brothers. Like I'm learning about your culture. I'm meeting your family. I'm trying your food. I didn't know how to dance bachata before I became a Lambda, but like my baby is Dominican, so like I got a lot of like teaching through that. I learned how to dance salsa. Like these are all things that I didn't necessarily grow up doing as much, because like that's just not necessarily a part of my culture. But it's cool that in that space, right, it was just a very diverse, lots of different countries and different folks coming together, right, versus other kind of areas. Like for example, here, right, like 95% of the brothers here are Mexican. From Arizona, right? It's just a different on how. So that's another interesting piece on how like people's experiences are going to be very different, right? If they're in one of our chapters in California, or if they're one of our chapters, in Miami, right, or in New York, New Jersey area, right? Like they're all very differently, right? And that culture, a lot of that even comes out of like our cultures as like, of our countries of origin, right? And just that we bring from home, because everybody's gonna have a different upbringing, etc. And I think that's interesting, because I don't know, and I don't know if you have an answer to this, but I have a feeling that I know there's still culture shifts within your organization and other organizations of yours, but I think there's a chance that like may be slightly different, right? Thinking about how there's so many different identities within like
blackness. I love that. No, I was about to say that. I was jumping. One, I went to Mount Vernon, and when you said El Salvador, I'm thinking all my homies from high school. And straight up, that was all Mount Vernon was. El Salvadorian. If you were of Latin descent, there's a lot of El Salvadorans, and if you're from Africa, a lot of Ghanaians. So straight up. And so I mean, I think about that in regards to Alpha. Alpha is heavily, I'm saying we're all Black, but but I would say, I've learned a lot of experiences with my brothers from Ghana and a lot of brothers from Nigeria. And then also discussing, as you say, non-monolithic experiences. Brothers have different vibes all over the United States. Like bros from upstate, from New York are different than my bros from down south. I mean, legit, the Alpha South, they got a different vibe in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And then and literally just like by itself, the Ohio bros, like this, I like just the way it is. And then California. So I definitely think about, as we think about organizations, large, minority organizations that we are, that is non-monolithic. And I've gotten to experience a lot of different cultures, even within the same org, which is so interesting. And how you say things, how you step, or, just greetings, all this stuff is different swags from all over the country. And so I think that I kind of agree with that. That was the question. I mean, I definitely have experienced that and seen that myself. And also, I mean, thinking about what you were saying about like reaffirming, I know, like, I think I would say joining an organization that had a lot of history within the Black experience in America. I'm a history major. That it's like reinvigorated, like knowing, looking back. I kind of I like looking back. So I know I try to read a little bit more, try to know some history, and then it kind of like gives me some guidance for the future. So I think that's pretty cool. I think I got another question for you, is that as you progressed and you're joining this organization, what aspects of it like help you think about and you kind of touched upon access and stuff, like how important was these organizations historically to like create a space to retain Latin students? And do you think they still have that weight today? And I'll go and by me asking that, I'm gonna say the same thing. Like, for instance, Greek letter organizations are not the same or have the same weight in the Black community. I'll be totally transparent. Like, going to college, you don't, it's not like the same. Joining a frat, Alpha and all that is the same as it was back when it was founded, because it was founded by like 7 men who were like the only Black people at Cornell. You know what I'm saying? But now you can go to college. You don't need to join no org to feel, you don't need to join Alpha or Sigmas. You don't need to join any of these things. They don't have the same impact, I don't believe. You know what I'm saying? As they used to in regards to the student experience. I think community experience, we have just as much impact and bandwidth and using our social media and advocacy and all that. But I'm talking about particularly for the student undergrad experience, I don't think it's as impactful as it was. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point, and I think there's a couple different layers to think about with that. But I guess to put it simply, I would say yes, it has that impact, but not necessarily always on purpose. If that makes sense, right? And where it's just, we're, like I said before, right, we're helping folks to find a community, to be connected. And sometimes they don't even end up being connected with us, right? Like sometimes, through them meeting us and going to events and things of that nature, they may meet another organization and they're doing their research and like this other organization seems great. And if they wouldn't have met them through us, like personally, maybe some others might feel different, but personally, cool. Like, I'm not here to like my way is not the only way, right? Like if you feel that you're doing your research and you meet this other organization, right, and you vibe with them, that you love their mission, right, whatever it may be, or maybe it's just their colors, whatever it may be. But if you're feeling it, like, good for you. Like, I'm happy that you found your little home, right, and that's where it's at, and that's kind of just always been a thing for me, right, and I'm really big on the unity thing, right, and that, like, at the end of the day, we're all doing this for the same reason, right, and also even bigger than that, at the end of the day, 4 different organizations, we all walk outside and we're not wearing letters, right? So anybody, like law enforcement, whoever, somebody comes up, they're not gonna be like, wait, are you a Lambda? Like, no. At the end of the day, we're all brown, right? Like, that's just the way it is, right? But I think just being able to create that environment helps a lot more than we realize. And helping folks to see, and then even, not to put us on a pedestal, because I don't really like that, because it really goes into like talented 10th kind of stuff, right, with Du Bois and things of that nature, right? But at the same time, seeing, for me, it helped even, right, like seeing other brown men succeeding, right, and that they're like and not even just men in fraternities, right? Because there are other men who are, like you were saying, right, who are succeeding without it. But I think it's just one of the avenues that we create, you know, we typically have a really strong GPA with the chapter, right? A lot of brothers have been graduating, etc., right? And having that model, right, and continuing to seeing these guys who are doing well, leaders on campus, etc., and really setting that example looks really good for students that are coming in, and right, and like helping them to have like a model to kind of follow, right? Like, for example, last summer, me and my Neo worked for the STEP program, right? And you know, in the STEP program, you know, for anybody listening that doesn't know what it is, it's a student transition empowerment program, and it's for first gen students. It's a summer bridge program. And, you know, not even necessarily, you know, trying to recruit them, but just like, you know, writing letters and like being like mentors and for them over the summer and providing advice, etc., just helping them to be where it's at. And I think a lot of the stuff that I learned and then that I understand, I wouldn't have gotten to without the fraternity, or maybe it would have taken me longer, is another thing to also think about.
I like that you said that. I love how we're pivoting, because I definitely think about, as we think of within marginalized groups, even forms of elitism. And you talked about that with the talented 10th, where, I mean, you know, I think that's something that, you know, there was some, I still have backlash when I read about Du Bois. I think he's great when he talks about other things like, you know, two spirits and all that stuff. But that was one thing that I definitely, you know, could say respectfully disagree with, you know, about like his thoughts on that, like that the responsibility was to the talented 10th to influence whatever. Yeah. But on the flip side, I do agree with you. Like, it is a sense of, you know, you become the average of the 5 people you hang out with, right? So if you have a group of men that strive for excellence, naturally it elevates you, right? You try to, I don't know, you just surround yourself with leaders. You try to be a leader. I don't know. It just by osmosis, right? You just kind of, you know, whatever. But I was thinking, like, at the end of the day too, though, with that, I really do believe that there is, not just say money wise, because people get jobs and stuff, there is something to the intellectual capital that both your organization and we have, right? Like, they're college men, you know, we're, you know, educated men that with that intellectual capital, not saying Du Bois is talented 10th though, but I do believe that we have a responsibility. Like, if we're going to become educated, we have a responsibility to obviously use that intellectual capital to influence the masses, as well as serve the community, right? Like, you know, with missions. Do you feel like that responsibility should be there, right? Like, as you know, as you achieve with certain organizations, that we have a responsibility to the community at large. And what are some ways? So, for instance, one of our ways is like a voteless people, hopeless people. We're trying to encourage people to vote. I think that's just one way. But what is a national program like that, and how do you think that fits into the community responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's tricky, right? Because you know, then you're bouncing back and forth on this, like, you know. But I think there's not necessarily anything wrong with. How do I word this? I think it's almost a difference between leading the charge, right, and kind of helping to create a path, but letting folks kind of walk that path themselves, if that makes sense. Right?
Like, we're not like saying we're so good, do what we say. It's more like we have a pathway. We if you want to choose it, or not like that, but like, it's like almost like you still present it. You present information. I don't know if that. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. It's not like we're telling people, like, you know, I don't know.
But I mean, at the end of the day, we got there is capital that comes out of being in a fraternity, right? Like, a lot of folks in a fraternity, just out of sheer, like, a lot of it's out of networking, right? End up in really like solid spaces, right? Whether it's like a good job or in grad school or whatever it may be. Like, that's just, at least in my experiences, right? I can't necessarily speak for all organizations, but like, I feel like a lot of brothers are really successful, and like, that's like awesome. Like, that's really cool. But I think it's just a weird balance between, like, is it your responsibility to then pay that forward? I would argue somewhat yes. Like, you joined an organization that was kind of built on that, so you should be thinking about that when you joined, right? Like, we were literally built on how we can help the community and also bridge the community, because there were also some like rifts between groups on campus, like with Cubans and Puerto Ricans, and like
Yeah.
that helped to kind of build unity in the community as well. So like that's a thing for me, right? Is that like if you're joining an organization that's kind of was born out of that, then you should think about it. And which I do think we do, right? There's definitely some disconnect on some members, you know, in some parts of the organization that may feel slightly different, but for the most part, right, we like when things are going on, we do our part that we can, whether it's typically it's raising money because that's like an easiest way, right, for or donating things, right? Like for example, like some of the hurricanes that have happened in like Puerto Rico and that part of the world. You know, there's been a lot of brothers who have taken time to put forth efforts to raise money and donations, etc., for helping out over there, right? Like that's something that with our sheer numbers and brothers like being in solid spaces like financially, how we can do that. But then also, right, another thing that really came up that I think is really cool to think about as well is that like sometimes our best way of servicing the community it can be like introspective, right? And thinking about, right, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, right? So we wanted to have our ways of really helping with that, which we did, right? We had brothers that like organized different marches in parts of the country, raised money, et cetera, et cetera. But we also had a couple, like for example, myself and a brother from Florida, we together put together a conversation with Roy Tatum, who's part of the NAACP in like the Phoenix area. I apologize, Roy, I'm forgetting exactly your position in it, but you know, he came on as well as my mentee Jamez, and they kind of helped to lead through a conversation, and we talked about just thinking about, you know, like anti-Blackness in our community, right? What that looks like, what that looks within our organization, right? How are we embodying what we want to do in the community, how we can best be an accomplice and an ally for folks, right? And how much of that goes beyond just going out and marching in the streets, right? Like, what are you doing when you know, I'm just bouncing into stereotypes with this, but like you go home, right, and you're you know, your uncle says something anti-Black, right? He's watching TV and he's watching something like with a Black person in the show, and he says something like, are you calling him out? Are you saying something? Are you correcting them and making that like that has more of an impact than we realize, right? And how those interpersonal pieces. So I think that's another thing that we don't necessarily think about is how can we have these organizations help better ourselves, right, to be better allies in the community as we're navigating. So I think a lot of it goes beyond the like tangible things that people think about, right? And like
I love that.
You know, so that's to me another piece that I would really definitely think about.
Well, I love that, and I love the inner work. And obviously, and you kind of touched upon it too. Of obviously, the work of anti-racism is for everybody. One, but two, I think that I definitely liked the fact that in this charge of anti-racism, but more specifically anti-racism as it affects Black people, that you're collaborating with groups like the NAACP. And I think there needs to be more. I think, from my understanding, there needs to be more collaboration between what like NPHC organizations and what. Please, please inform me. What are the other ones called? Like, what's the overall the multicultural? They're all the different fraternities and organizations that are of different ethnicities. I feel like there needs to be more collaboration across all of those. And I think it is those united voices and those conversations that needs to be had. And I think that from what I'm hearing is I think that the work needs to also, when you say that, like we're doing a lot of outward work for communities, but there needs to be a lot of inward work within our organizations for professional development, personal development, working on ourselves and all those things. Because how can you project out to the community if you're not working on within, right? Like nothing's perfect within. What do you think? I mean, moving forward, when you think of that, like the anti-racism or collaborations, I mean, do you think that there needs to be more work within that, you know, unification between Black and brown people, just in general, and this fight for anti-racism?
Always, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's, and I think it goes so I tread this lightly just so folks don't misinterpret it, but I guess it definitely goes both ways.
Yeah, no, it
Right.
does. Yeah.
But you also got to think about, I mean, yes, it goes both ways, but we also have to dive into like when we're thinking about power and privilege and oppression, like that is a very complex thing to think about, and how like, and that's why I specifically brought up anti-blackness, right? Because as brown folks, as a a Latin community, right, like we do still experience racism and oppression and things of that nature, right? But at the same time, we can be anti-black and perpetuate that and that bigger system, right? And it's just a really complicated topic and things to like kind of think about. But I think that's the one thing that always needs more work, because that's embedded in a lot of our culture. When you think about a lot of things, right? Like whether it's I don't know if you've ever watched any show on a Spanish channel, but they are typically very pale.
Okay. Yeah.
Like that's not a coincidence. Like that's just what what do we put on a pedestal of beauty, right? And it's like it's a very white Eurocentric way of thinking about it, and when folks have more indigenous qualities or more whatever qualities it may be that don't fit into that little box, they're not necessarily put onto that pedestal, and then they're not going to be shown, and then that perpetuates because then folks are watching that, and then that's what they then put into their head as what's like beautiful, what's correct, what's the norm, and then they go through that, and it's even more specific than that sometimes, right? Like there's been some countries in Latin America that have had like some pretty pervasive and explicit ethnic cleansing that have happened, right, in terms of like forcing folks to interracially connect and have mixed babies, and they'll be more and more white as it went, right, basically, right? Especially when you're looking at like and this is this podcast episode by itself, but like DR and Haiti, right, and how that right, and like that's even a thing with a lot of Dominicans at times, right, where some of them may you may talk to them and you say like, yeah, like you talk to them about being like Afro Latino or like being black, right, and they're like, no, I'm not black, I'm Dominican, and it's like, well, like and like blackness is a very interesting concept, but I think it's also on the flip, right, like both sides, right, because how are we defining Latinidad and like being Latino, Latinx, how are we defining that, and how that's like an umbrella, and that there's like blackness can fall under that, and like on the flip side, like I think how are we defining blackness, right, and like what does it mean to be black, and if you are Afro Latino, like does that take away from your blackness, basically, and I think there's just always room for us to work on that and understand that like these concepts are a lot more like broad, and the lines are a lot more blurred than we realize, and that it's like not, no like pun intended with it, but it's like not a black and white thing, right? Like it's like there's just a lot of blurs in that, and it's just like you see it in different, even with Africans too, right? Like like folks who come from Africa and whatever, whether it's Ghanaian, which I know you talked about earlier, Ethiopia, whatever it may be, right? And there's tends to be sometimes a gap when it comes to like African American versus African versus black, right, and how those, right, but I'm gonna I'll just be blunt, the exact same thing as I said earlier, right? Like whether you are identify as African or identify as Ethiopian or identify as African American or identify as black or Afro Latino, whatever it may be, right, end of the day, we've seen what's been going on for forever, but especially this year, right? Well, not especially this year, but just more in the media, whatever. But the point is that you go outside, he's not going to check like, wait, you're not actually black, you're from an African country,
you're
right?
a Dominican.
Like, no, like,
exactly.
I
said that.
So I think,
no, I love that. And I think like you said, like the work of anti-racism, we're doing a lot of work. And also what you said too, between cultures, that even me as a black man could project racist ideology. Like I said, like even if like the work of anti-racism, like I could say something that's anti-black, being black. And, like, I don't know if I was getting it. That's what I was trying to get at. So like with these conversations and dialogue, and then I could say something and not say it's racist coming from a place of privilege, but I could say something ignorant and prejudiced toward you with assumptions and all those things. And that is a racist, bringing up racist behavior. So it's like almost like we all need to do this learning. We all need to collaborate. We all need to work toward bettering the communities. And I think what you and Jimenez does, and just in general with these collaborations and these partnerships, is that these are what this needs to be done. And it's not these issues are not siloed, if that makes sense. They're not siloed, they're blurred, and these conversations and this is like a whole effort, a whole community effort. That's why I think I like that you said that, like that you're doing the thing. Like, I don't know. When I heard a lot of the narrative, like when we say those things, like I'm not this, I'm not that, but okay, I always say that too. I say like, that funny, like I'm not black, I'm OJ kind of thing. It's like, okay, OJ, but you got arrested. You know what I'm saying? Like, you still black. Like, it don't matter what what you think. If you walk out in that door and you go out into the world, go out to society, they're not gonna say, wait, Philip, you're Philip Linwood, that's a military brat son. No, they don't see all these different identities. They just see what they see. And so I definitely felt that one. I don't know where I was going. I think that was a tangent, but I felt that commonality, that we need to do this work. At the end of the day, I think I'm just going roundabout to say that we need to do this work together. And there's no, I think you're saying this too, COVID, all this. There is no like, oh, this is not going to affect me. It's not going to come from me. Because it's going to come to your door. Like, all this racism is going to come to your door. You keep on saying it's not going to come to me. And I've always thought about that. It's like, you can keep on saying racism is not going to come to me. I'm living good. Or racism is not going to come to me. I got a job. Racism is not going to come to me. I'm educated. Racism is not going to come for me. But at the end of the day, it comes for you. Like, and you can't say you're not above it. And that's where you need to do this work. You need to have these conversations. You need to educate yourself, equip yourself. I believe the mind is the most powerful tool. But I definitely felt that what you said is like, even, you could say I'm Afro-Caribbean or Afro-Latin, Latinx or whatever, and say it's not going to come for me. But it come for you. I don't know. It's like we have to, like I said, I think that's what I was trying to get at, is that we need to have these conversations, but we also need to equip ourselves. We also need to identify and point out racism. And also we have to have, I think, as a responsibility, as we have platforms such as my podcast, but also platforms within our organizations to really equip the community to handle this.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the intellectual capital comes in play. Like, as you learn and surround yourself with educated educators, you can't just hold this knowledge.
Yeah.
Like you can't just say we're all educated, we're gonna get this college degree, we're gonna join these college organizations and then hold this knowledge. I really feel like we have a responsibility to, it's like not educate, like, oh, listen to me, I'm smarter. No, it's like more like I want to share this information I learned. You can take it or leave it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think, I mean, that's you had a lot of good points there, and it's a lot to really unpack. But I think the biggest thing that I just want to like also kind of touch on or think about, right, is that how do I word what I'm trying to say, right? So earlier I was talking about kind of like when I was saying I kind of wanted to tread lightly, is just kind of to think about how, for me, right, we talk about racism and oppression and things of that nature. And I think what kind of permeates it all, and is kind of the umbrella piece, is that anti-Blackness, right? And that anti-Blackness does exist within the Latinx community, right? But I think the reason that I bring that up specifically is to think about how that differentiates, like, directionally, and how it's a little bit different depending on who you're talking to and what you're looking at. And I know you were talking about, like, for example, right, like if you were to say something to me, for example, right, and how that kind of unpacks. And to me, that's not necessarily racist, right, as opposed to like essentially like prejudice or discriminatory, right, versus for me, and when I think about racism, is how is it reinforcing that, like, systemic aspect, right? And where there's power involved as well, right? And I think that's also the piece that some people have a gap on, some folks have gaps on when it comes to being Black and racist. Like, yes, you cannot be, and again, this is my opinion, right? But like, yes, you can't be racist to somebody who is like, say, white, right, on an interpersonal basis, right? But when you're talking about perpetuating anti-Blackness, whether that's internally or something you said or whatever it may be, right? Like, be whoever you want to be, like, that's great, like, that's awesome. But when it turns into anti-Blackness, it's really like reinforcing and perpetuating this system that is living to oppress folks, and by perpetuating that system and reinforcing a racist system, that's the part that gets tricky, right? And you just got to make sure you kind of remember that. But there's a difference between, because I think folks don't think about racism on like there's like levels, there's like interpersonal, right? There's also internal racism, and how are you being like, anti-Black or me being like anti my Latinidad or my brownness, right? And then there's like a structural and a systemic level, and all those are very different. And you can reinforce some of those other levels, but not necessarily be racist on that interpersonal piece, which is like, it's like I said, it's really complicated, but I think that's just another piece to think about. And how are we defining Blackness? How are we defining being brown, being Latinx, right? And how is that creating a really inclusive understanding of that, and helping to push back? And then at the end of the day, like you said, like, collectively, we have a lot more power, right? And not even beyond us, right? Like, even thinking about like low income white folks too, right? Who are not like, they're in a better like position when you're looking at racial privilege, right? But at the end of the day, those like rich white people that don't care about us, like, they don't care about them either, right? So like, at the end of the day, we all band together, do what we got to do. We could definitely do what we got to do because we'd have the numbers, but we have like these gaps between us that are using, which a bunch of other different pieces, but like, they're really dividing us, right? And I think that's something that we need to make sure we're kind of like thinking about,
And I think that was like, I mean, and we want, me and you could go on circle, like, not bad circles, but we go on rants. But I think one of the main things that pulls us back, and obviously to this topic, I heard two things: is division, and that's one of the things. And two is that both our organizations had the point of unifying, within a group, right? But I think that we need to move past that too. It's like, yes, you're a Lambda, yes, I'm an Alpha, but we also are Black and brown people. And I definitely believe in the unification, and I definitely believe in this just cross support. There's to me, I don't want to believe in this model minority. That we are. It's like there. I say needs to be unification, but I think we're like, I'm slowly learning more about other cultures. Because as I learn about other cultures, I realize that the system is affected, as you said, not just like you can always, in my mind, I can think of like the plight of a Black man, but I also try to learn like, but it's not just the plight of the Black man, it's the plight of the brown man. It's the plight of someone else, that's not a privilege. And that is somewhere where I'm working on educating myself, not just within Black issues, but other issues that affect. I like how you brought it up too. Like, I never thought about that, like how that, when you said your organization started, was just the simple fact of going to college and not being able to like have the ballot in Spanish, right? So as an educator, as a Black educator, I need to think about like, what am I, not just supporting Black students, but I'm also supporting people that have second language students, and I think that's where the conversations of these partnerships with different cultures is going to really help us understand that there's systems at play that are not just affecting us in silos. And that's where we need to work together, because like, that's just not going to click for me about language disadvantages, or maybe ability disadvantages. You got to get outside of your own identities to help other identities. And I think one way to get outside of your own identity is to meet with other people outside of your identities and have those conversations. Oh, wow, that's right. We need to make sure that ballots, I just think the simple fact our election coming up, that ballots are in different languages. You know what I'm saying? That was really, those were that was a form of voter suppression, that I wasn't really familiar with. I knew about the dolls getting sucked on Black people and those things, but also just inherently voter suppression was not having the ballots in other languages.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the things that we, me having conversations and thinking about is really going to help. I think really help create system change is not just realizing that as marginalized groups that we're in this quote unquote fight individually, is that we need to be in this together. Because like you're right, like in my own tunnel vision, I might not see the issues that affect other marginalized groups.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that was even a question. That was just like a long ass statement.
Nah, you have a good point, man. You have a good point.
I know, but that's what this conversation has helped me understand, is that you're saying you're having these conversations. And I think that's what we need to bring back too. And I think there needs to be opportunities in general where when we have issues relating to systemic issues, that we have diversity at the table and we have conversations like we're having right now on the podcast, or you having with the NAACP. Like I can't just get all the Black men. I need, sometimes I need to talk to my brothers and have all the Black men together, but I need to have conversations outside of just Black men and really understand issues for other groups too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because it's helping me understand that, like, take off the blinders sometimes too.
No, that helped me a ton. Yeah. No, I had that experience for sure with folks that I met in undergrad, definitely. Because I definitely took the time to go out of my way and meet folks from other organizations. And especially my semester, right? There weren't a ton of non-Black Greeks that crossed. Did I say that right? Yeah. Like there were not a ton of like but there were a lot of folks in, Zeta Omicron had a line, IA had a line, Mu Mu, the Noops had a line. There were a lot of folks on campus at the time, and I was all about connecting with them, and IA especially, man. I love IA, and they know it. Those are my boys, and vice versa, especially Spring 14. So and being in spaces with those folks, right, and not even just IA, right, like it just helped me to really connect more with Black Mason, right, like not necessarily like I don't want to sound like I was trying to infiltrate or nothing like that. But I love like I really like especially going back to like high school and middle school, I was talking about I didn't necessarily connect with my culture as much as I like I would have wanted, which again I didn't realize much that I needed or wanted at the time. But like most of my closest friends in that time period, were Black. Like it just were like those are a community that I like ended up going to more. Like I didn't, I hate throwing out stereotypes, but like literally like majority of my like junior high school experience was playing 2K, Madden, basketball on the street, right? Like for real, like that was basically my, like we go to the park and we play basketball, and then we go back and like, my best friend's grandma would make like some bomb food, right? And then, or one time it's like, just for real, like that was just my experience, right? And it was very different than if I grew up in like a predominantly Mexican community, or if I grew up in a predominantly whatever community, right? And so like that was just, I always felt more connected to that, right? Like I grew up listening more to hip hop than I did to like reggaeton and like banda and like I just did. Like I grew up huge Nas fan. I was a Kanye fan growing up. I'm a little less of a Kanye fan now.
Oh man,
but,
I missed the whole Kanye.
Yeah, but like so long story short, right? Like it was nice to be able to connect with those folks, and they always got my back. And then being in that space also helped me to see more. Just like not necessarily like going to that space and asking like, hey, like, what do you think about blah, 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 but just like hearing folks have conversations and like unpacking how things are going. And then that led me, I was an AFAM minor. So I took African American studies as my minor. Because I actually took that because I was very interested in, thinking about exactly what we're talking about, right? Like I was curious on how, like on like learning a little bit more on what the Black experience kind of is, and like the history of that, and learning like about the diaspora, and everything that really unfolded from that, and what that really looks like, and thinking on how that both mirrors and differentiates from the experience of my people, right? And how that plays out. That was a big reason that I was interested in that. um and I think it ended up working that way really well, because I feel like it really helped me to, like, that program really radicalized me. It really helped me to like think about race in more ways that I used to not, like, just for like whatever reason. Mostly it's just exposure, right? Like a lot of folks don't necessarily think about it because they just haven't had that conversation before. They haven't been put in a space to really be taught to think critically about these things, and go beyond the kind of the surface level. And so being in that space and being professors and having these conversations, and especially at first, I very much took a back seat, and just listened to what was going on in the class. I did my readings, etc., because like I was in a space that wasn't it wasn't necessarily for me, like, if that makes sense, right? It was like it was very much centered on the Black experience, on Black folks, and I wanted to honor that, and make sure that was key, right? That I was basically like a foreigner in that space, right? And eventually you do that, you start to learn more, and it helps you to, like, not necessarily feel like I'm part of that space, but that I can engage in that space, and be able to communicate and take things back, right? And then that goes into these conversations that I'm talking about. Is a lot of things that I'm able to converse and talk about with my brothers, right, are from having these conversations with people saying like, yeah, like, this is a thing, you should think about it, and figure out ways we can unpack it. And I'm like, word. So I'm gonna go have that conversation with some brown people, and we're gonna figure out how to unpack it. Like, so it's cool how that, like, and like making sure that you're centering the conversation in the words of those folks. And I think Lambda was a big thing that helped with that, because I just met a lot of folks through it. Not even just specifically with that, man. I just met a lot of friends. I got a lot of like mentors. I got, there's members of other organizations that I basically consider like my brothers, right? Like, especially I'm not too close with older IA, but the noops on campus, like, there's a couple of them, some of the older brothers who are basically like big brothers for me, right? Like, I know I can hit them up for whatever, right? And it's just cool, like, to build that connection even outside of your org. And then my Sans from the Alphas were just, we still hang out, man. I'm ready to go back. Mike stays having his, like parties in DC. I got to come back, catch up with my mans. We haven't celebrated since he graduated law school, so I got to.
Oh yeah, he's good people, man.
And, yeah, that's my homie.
Bro. So this is my last question related to this, but like, you study well-being, right? And how do you believe that just being at Lambda has contributed to your well-being?
Definitely thinking about the feeling at home, that you have a space where you can authentically be yourself, right? And have folks who affirm your authentic self, right? And they are also their authentic selves, and just all of those pieces kind of combined. And then having folks who are care for your well-being, whether that's helping you with that networking you were talking about, or if something happens, I know I got brothers that are like, will be there for me, right? Like, drop of whatever, right? Like, I got brothers that I haven't talked to in like 2 years, just because it just hasn't happened, right? But I know if both ways, right? Like, if something what happened to them and they call me, I'm like, bro, like, I'll figure out what I need to do to help you, and vice versa, right? Like, because at the end of the day, like, that's how it is with family too, right? At least for me, that's how I am, right? With a lot of my family, that if I don't talk to my cousin for like a long time, and then one of them calls me, like, it's act like we talked yesterday. Like, so that's another beauty of it. So I think just all those pieces combined, like, it's helped with physical, it helped with too, because I've been working out with brothers and going to the gym, whatever, etc. Like, socially, also mentally, right? Because being a first gen student in a big PWI, not knowing what was going on, even though I thought I did, that was nice to like mentally be able to have some folks who can like help talk me through some of that stuff, and I didn't have to do it alone anymore because it's not cool doing that alone. It ain't fun. That's also why I got into work that I'm in, to also have other students who don't have to go through it alone. Like that's just even though I'm a solo, so like yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, like definitely all of the above. So I do, basically, long story short, I think it was definitely what I needed. I didn't know it at the time, but I was able to like, and it was really cool to pay it forward, right? Like being PM assistant, PM for like new lines coming in, and being a mentor for other students and other like new brothers as they came in. Like no better feeling, man. No better feeling of like just having somebody come in and then being able to help them and like their family too, right? Like it's got a fun side and a work side. It's just So it's been great.
All right, so this is the part of the show I lied, talking about solid supplies. It's called Shot for Shot. So you get to ask me any random question. I get to ask you any random question. If you want to go first, I'll go first.
Oh, man. You go first. I got to think.
All right, so you're obviously in Arizona, right? Just pros and cons comparison. What do you like and dislike about Arizona? And then what is the big difference between Arizona and the DMV that you've noticed?
Pros and cons. So definitely pro food. Food
Okay.
is banging out here, definitely. And people are really, for the most part, really nice, specifically in Tucson.
Okay.
And it's a lot chiller of a vibe. But I think that goes both ways, because I think when I think about the con and what's different is that I just kind of miss DC. Like there's just a lot of action, right? Like I miss going to U Street, like walking down the street here in Go-Go and getting some, just music going, get some wings and mumbo, like all of that. Like I just miss, there's a lot more action going on versus here. It's just a lot quieter, which is nice at times, but sometimes you want to get a little more lively. You want to have like that city kind of feel. So it kind of lacks that. And then it's just hot, bro. It's just hot. Like it's October and it was like 103 today. It's
like
just
dry hot though, right? It's dry hot, right?
It is dry hot, but it's still, at the end of the day, man, hot is hot. Like I would rather be in 103 here than like 95 in the DMV.
Humidity. I think the sticky hot's the worst.
Yeah, but I wish it would be like if it was dry, but it stayed like the max was maybe like 90, it would be perfect. But just once you hit over 100, man, that's tough.
Is it like so hot? Is it so hot that it's blurry in the distance? You know what I'm talking about?
You mean where you see like the waves of the
waves and like you see like is it like that kind of hot?
It is,
like, the street like looks like it's like steaming or something.
Yeah, when like in the Western movies. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Definitely.
I might take that for a couple of days, but not the whole time. Okay, your question from me.
All right, one I got is okay, I got a question. So you transferred to JMU. Like walk me through that a little bit, I guess, particularly thinking about culture shock. Like was there
so
JMU?
So I went to Mount Vernon and I hung out and partied too much in high school. I wasn't the most academic. Surprise, look at your boy. And so I got waitlisted by JMU. It was my school. I wanted to go there, but I got waitlisted. It was like the school I always dreamed of going to because I went to like a camp in the 8th grade, African American Male Academy. And so it was like the school I wanted to always go to because I stayed on campus in the 8th grade. Like college was James Madison, but I didn't handle business and got waitlisted. And so I had to go to Bowie State in Maryland. But I was a lot slimmer then, a lot slimmer. And I was on a track scholarship. So it was free. But in the back of my mind, it was like, I don't want to be here. So you already know how that is, right? If you already go into a situation you don't want to be there, you don't stay. So I stopped running track, but luckily for me, it wasn't really a track scholarship. It was more like an academic scholarship, meaning I still went to Bowie for free as long as I kept my grades up. I was in the honors college at Bowie, and literally I went to JMU every single weekend, like every weekend. Like,
damn, that's a drive, yo.
Yeah, it is. It's a drive. I made it worse. I tell you to make it worse. I used to drive all the way up to Dale State, pick up my best friend Hillard, and then drive all the way down to Harrisonburg from Dale State. And I would say that my wife Maggie, girlfriend at the time, wasn't a major influence in me transferring. But she was a major influence in me getting my grades together. She's like, "Are you studying?" So I went to Bowie. First semester, I didn't do so well acclimating to college. Every other semester, I made dean's list because I was getting the hell out of there. And so I had shout out to this guy named Art Dean. He was the director of CMIS, which is the equivalent of ODIME. We networked, and he was like, just do this and this and this, and I'll make sure you'll transfer. I'll stick on you. And he was also a Mount Vernon alum, so I met him at the high school fair too. So I was like, Art Dean, I didn't get in. He's like, well, just do this, this, and this. So I shout out, give mad love to Art Dean. He was there forever. He's like an icon. It's kind of like, the JMU legend. If you're a Black student, you know who Art Dean is, right? Like he was the director of CMIS. And so I treated Bowie State like it was a community college, meaning I was never on campus. I commuted. I one time took my refund for staying on campus and said, you know what, I'm gonna take this money for housing. And I'm just gonna live in Alexandria and drive to Bowie every day for class. Like I literally turned into a commuter student, and I transferred. Now in hindsight,
Bowie's lit, man.
No, it wasn't when I was there. I ain't gonna lie, it wasn't when I was there. It transformed tremendously since I left. New buildings, everything. I will say this, me, like every phase, I will not take for granted that I did make some good friends at Bowie, right? Like I got Ricky, my man Ricky, and people, Ricky, who else? Alan, people that was on my floor for my freshman dorm. They were older than me because even when I was in the honors college, they put me as a freshman with older guys, upperclassmen. So they took me out, they bought me drinks.
Big shot.
They bought me drinks and stuff. But that would be the one positive that I got out of Bowie, was that I still have sustainable relationships. I still stay in touch with them. But mentally, you already know that once you're checked out, you don't want to be somewhere. I didn't really go. I didn't go to any football games at Bowie. I didn't go. I went to like one dance. I did go to a bunch of probates. Those are pretty lit at HBCU. I went, but I didn't see that. I saw like the Q's probate and the Delta's probate. And that's pretty cool because they had real yards and plots at HBCU. But I really didn't want to go there. I was ready to leave. I had like in my mind, I was like, I'm going to get to JMU. Even if I got waitlisted, I'll just do what I need to do and I'm going to get there. And then when I got there, I mean, I guess I had put JMU on a pedestal, and just like anything else, once you get there, it's not the land of milk and honey. You realize that I loved it. It was a great experience, but it wasn't as perfect. I got in my first.
It might be the land of milk, to be honest. So.
Yeah. Hey, I got my first fight there. I got called the N-word there and got in a fight there. I got jumped there.
Whew.
But it was interesting. I love Jamie though. I would say that. It's a
beautiful campus, man.
It's a beautiful campus. And it's funny. It's like I've talked to a lot of Black students in hindsight. And what was sad for Black alum is that we can all recall one racial incident that we had. And I was like, damn, that sucks.
Yeah.
Oh man. You're like, yeah. Oh man.
I mean, I've been to JMU for a weekend and I experienced it. So
I was like, oh, but I was like, oh, it's like that, it's like that fun, take the veil down. It still has every institution has its issues.
Yeah.
And I think they're all obviously now actively working on it with all these anti-racism task force. But I would say the biggest difference is if I could go back in the time machine, I think I still would have transferred. I still had in the back of I wanted to go to JMU. I probably would have got my grades up. But if I had to go to Bowie again like that, I would have gave the university a little bit more of me. Like really, maybe join a club before I left. Like I still would have been like, hey guys, I'm gonna do this, but I won't see you next semester. But I would have at least gotten involved a little bit more on campus. So that was good. I like that. I thought about that. I haven't thought about the transition. HBCUs are fun though. Their homecomings are great.
Absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely. I definitely can go back to Bowie like I went. People forgot that I even transferred. They're like, "What's good, Phil?" It's like, yeah, because they remember me my freshman and sophomore year. They didn't realize I didn't finish. like, I just saw you. Stop coming. Maybe they thought I just got a job and dropped out of school or something. So I do remember that too, because I didn't tell everyone I transferred. And I got a text from one of my friends like, Phil, what's good, man? Where I haven't seen you around. I was like, I'm at JMU now. He's like, what? Oh, so. All right, man, it's been a pleasure. I think we got to do it again. We were all over. We talked about our two organizations. We talked about anti-racism. I know, I think we were all over the place, but I think that's great because I want to do this again. Maybe you'll be a return guest. Maybe you will be a return guest. We'll figure it out. But this has been a great episode. I want the listeners shout outs and plugs. So this is the opportunity to show some love, shout out whoever you want to shout out, and then plugs where the listeners can find you and things that you're working on. I know that you're doing a lot of good things, so I want you to please share it. I'll make sure to write it down so that I put those in the show notes so they can follow up with you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, just real quick, just thinking through a lot of the things that we talked about, really centered on like mentorship, right? And folks kind of helping you get where you need to be. And I think for me, that's the biggest shout outs, man, is just like shout outs to like, my old heads and my pro fights, right? Like, y'all know who you are, like Jose Valerio, right? Jose Velasquez, Chris Amador, right? And even my Neos too. Right, both. I got Neos at Towson and at Mason. Like they're one of the reasons I do what I do every day, right? Yeah. So like, shout out to those guys. Shout out to my whole organization. I love y'all. I'll always be here, active every year, doing what I got to do. Keep an eye out for me on that national board ticket. Make sure you vote for me. Nah.
Okay.
But also, like, lastly, just shout out again to TJ Brown, Lewis Forrest. We both got some good connections with Lewis. We love Lewis. Keep doing your thing, man. You're holding it down. Everybody loves you, man, for sure. And then same thing with Kasim too, downstairs in EIP. Miss y'all. Be back soon. We'll connect, even if it's 6 feet apart. We'll connect.
That's up.
But we gotta do what we gotta do, man. Safety first. So, and then, yeah, just lastly, just shout out to everybody, man. Like everybody that I ever interact with, right? You have more impact on my life than you realize. Like at the end of the day, every single person I've ever interacted with has helped me to get to this point, right? So I thank every single person for that because I think we don't do that enough. And acknowledging that, like, if anything in my pathway changed, it would be different, right? And I like the path that I'm on. So thank you all for helping me to be on that path because it's a wonderful path and you're all great. So shout out to everybody. And then obviously shout out to Phil, Positive Philter, Wu-Tang. We're doing our thing. Appreciate you letting me be on here. I had a good time. So definitely shoot me some follows, man. It's so Instagram and social media, Instagram and Twitter is both bpalomo75. Hop on there and follow that. Also, I got a food Instagram. It's zona.planta, zona.planta. Follow me on that. Search me up on LinkedIn, Brian Palomo. I'll connect with you there. Let's talk. Let's chat. Let's build connections. I love networking. Let's do what we got to do. And then also just look up Lambda Theta Phi, man. Go to the lambdas.org. Check us out. We got a new website in the works. But for now, we got the old one up there. You can still pop on and check us out and do what we got to do. Yeah, much love.
That was great. I loved it. I loved all the shout outs and I love the shout outs that the common people shout out. Yeah, once again, shout out to Lewis and Kasim, man. They're doing good things at the community.
Yeah.
And they're older than me, so they're wiser.
Hey, they're just wise in general, man.
They're wise in general, but they're good people. And I'm glad that they're in my life as well. And as I said, I agree with that whole statement. We meet the people we're supposed to meet, and we stay in touch with the people we're supposed to stay in touch with. So please give this good gentleman a bunch of follows, connect with him, support him. He's doing big things. He's going to change the world. Obviously, he's getting a PhD, not just for the money. I don't think educators get a lot of money. So he's doing it. So he's doing it with the hope of helping others. So let's support him and definitely keep him in our good vibes and keep him lifted up. So if you like this episode, please share it with a family and friend. It's Positive Philter, filter spelled with a PH. Also, if you want to call and leave a voicemail, you can call the hotline. It's 571-336-6560. That's 571-336-6560. Spreading positivity is a movement, and thank you for listening.